Some of you might remember I had hip surgery almost 6 years ago. Yeah, thank you, college football and hockey. Well, I keep running into people with all kinds of injuries, so to help you out, my orthopedic surgeon is here, and he is one of the absolute best in the country. It's Ask the Doctor. Welcome back, Dr. Benjamin Dome.
Thank you.
Hey, Doc.
Good to be here.
Yeah, I can't help but notice a lot of the ladies clapped and screamed when you walked in the studio. Yeah. He's a married man.
That was for you.
He's a married man. His family is actually here in studio. But, Doc, I want to talk to you first about an article that you published and that has gone national. And this is about something that every pregnant woman needs to know. It's information that a lot of people don't know. Fill us in.
Well, this started when I had a patient who came to me and told me my mother tore my labrum in my hip. I said, what do you mean? She says, I was giving birth, and my mother was trying to help me by pulling on my leg, and I felt a rip in my hip. And sure enough, that was the pain she remembered from childbirth, was a pain in her hip. Forget about the actual childbirth itself. She remembered she had a pain in her hip. So she had indeed torn some cartilage in her hip called the labrum. And it brought my attention to this injury, which can occur in childbirth because of the positioning of the hip. And thereafter, I saw a run of a dozen or so women like this who had sustained an injury to their hip in childbirth. So I realized that this was something that occurred somewhat regularly and hadn't really been described or recognized in the obstetric community as of that time. So we wrote an article about it, about this series of a dozen or so women who'd had an injury like this, and published it in the Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology. And the idea was to increase awareness within the obstetric community and hopefully to help prevent these injuries, which are really very preventable.
Right. It's very easy to fix. How do you fix this?
Well, the first thing you do is you prevent it.
Right.
We prevent it by avoiding these positions where somebody is pulling on a woman's leg while she's delivering a baby. And you can imagine that this could hurt the hip, but it's exacerbated by the fact that they're under epidural. So they may not feel it when it happens. So what we realized is if we avoid having someone else pull on the leg and instead let the woman pull on her own legs or position her own legs, that she's very unlikely to injure herself. Now that's the prevention aspect. We also realize there's an opportunity to treat those women who do have an injury like this, and a lot of times they went through many, many months after delivery continuing with hip pain, and it was thought to be just a consequence of the pregnancy or delivery, but in fact it was a hip injury, and it's something that we can fix with an arthroscopic surgery in the hip, which is of course what I specialize in.
All right, well, we have some viewer questions. We have
Sure.
a lot of people that poured in questions, especially when I talked about that I came to you when I had my hip done, and I didn't even know that I had the pain. I mean, didn't know what it was for a long time. We have a lot of viewers like that, so take a look at this first question.
Sure.
Hi, doctor. I was just curious to know if there was any way to prevent any long-term knee damage. I play a lot of sports recreationally. If you can give me any feedback on that, that would be great.
Well, first of all, stop playing sports. No, I'm kidding. I'm a former athlete myself and, of course, a sports medicine doctor, so I love sports. I think that the prevention is the crux of that question, and prevention is really where we want to live, because once you have an injury, then it becomes a much bigger deal and much harder to treat. So, firstly, depending on our age, we may want to consider how we enter certain sports. So a lot of us are 40-something years old, wanting to get back in shape or get into a sport that we haven't done in a long time. That's a very dangerous spot to be, and we want to introduce sports as slowly as we can, slowly and gradually, rather than jumping into something very quickly. The second thing is conditioning before we get into a high velocity type of sport or a big load if we're lifting heavy weights, things of that nature. We want to start by being in good general condition before we step up the loads.
All right, we got another viewer question. Take a look.
Hey doctor, what can I do to slow down the effects of arthritis on my pinky finger?
Pinky finger, tough one. You know, with arthritis in general, we have to figure out the source of the problem. Why is there arthritis? So sometimes if we get arthritis in our hands, it's a result of a general body condition like a rheumatoid arthritis or generalized inflammation. Those things need to be diagnosed and can usually be treated medically. If it's not a result of a systemic condition, if it's a result of an injury, then most commonly we can treat it with physical therapy or rehabilitation to strengthen the muscles surrounding the joint.
Now, something that I tried with you, which was PRP, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, all the athletes seem to be doing this. What do you think about this trend, and do you think it's working?
Well, I think PRP is part of the larger trend of biologic treatment of injuries, which is a very, very important part of my practice today. So that includes things like stem cells, growth factors, and PRP, or platelet-rich plasma, as you mentioned. And this is kind of a promising area. I think it's the next generation of treatment of injury.
All right, we have a question here on Facebook. This is from Liz. It says, what is the #1 injury you see, and how can I avoid it?
Well, that's a great question. I think the thing that I've seen grow the most is injuries in high-intensity training. This has been a huge growth field in the fitness industry, and we're talking about repetitive squats and box jumps and power cleans and jerks and things of that nature. And you get somebody who hasn't exercised in a while, there's a power clean, and they go to do an Olympic powerlifting like this. They might do fine for some reps, but after they fatigue a little bit, they might lose their form. And all you need to do is lose your form one time, and you can injure your back or your hip. So we see this all the time.
Right, and a lot of people that are getting older are still trying to get into some of this stuff because it's a fad and it's a trend, and they're getting hurt.
Well, absolutely, and I'm all for being in shape, getting back in shape. These are good things. I think what I would advocate is doing it slowly and gradually, and again, conditioning before high load.
All right, another Facebook question. This is from Yvette. I started running recently at 49. How can I avoid injury?
So running is a great form of exercise, and probably something that our bodies are naturally made to do. If you look at us in the hunter-gatherer state, we run, we chase animals, and we stab them with a spear, right? This is our, this is our native hunter-gatherer state. But I think that we lose our natural running form as we get older and go years without running. So form is probably the most critical thing. And it sounds funny, you never heard of a running coach, but I would get a running coach if you're going to get into running and haven't done it in a while.
All right, Dr. Dome, thank you so much for answering our questions. We'll be right back. For more on Dr. Dome, go to our website, windycitylive.com.